Studios. Joining us now, the president of the Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation, Mike McCormick. Mike, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. So every day it seems like we're getting reports about the economy and inflation and supply chain issues and challenges, and we talk about it here on the program quite a bit. But glad to have you in to give us the ground level view of what's going on in the agricultural community, which of course is so vital to the state of Mississippi's economy.
Well, inflation is of farmers' worst enemy. It's our number one concern. Soaring input costs are really impacting our farms here all over the state, all over the nation. You can see where some inflationary numbers are saying we're up about 9% on inflation this year. I can tell you our figures show that it's probably around 18% for the input costs that we're using in our farms. So the farmers are all absorbing that cost this year. It's probably not in their budgets. They're not able to pass that cost along up the supply chain. So that's just something that we're eating on our farms this year.
Are we at risk, to the extent you can discuss it, Mike, are we at risk of some of these farms just collapsing from an economic and financial perspective?
Well, you know, this is eerily similar times to the 1980s when our farm got in financial trouble, just to be honest. You saw all of the for sale signs and the auctions of farm equipment and farmland all over the U.S. at that point in time. I don't think we're there yet. But the cure for inflation is to raise interest rates, and that's a farmer's number two enemy. Because farmers tend not to have enough money in their savings account or their checking account to fund their farming habits. We have to go to the bank and borrow that money for production loans. So we're going to catch the other end of that, and it's going to be some tough times before we work our way out of this.
Yeah, it's a good point. I hadn't thought about it. That's fairly typical though for a farm to borrow money in advance to set out for the year.
Absolutely. And the farmers go, before they plant their crops in the field, they go to their lending institution. They put a budget out there, and the lending institution goes over it with a fine-tooth comb, and they got to find a profit in there somewhere for them to approve that loan. So they're going to do it next year at a higher interest rate.
Right. Do environments, from an economic perspective, Mike, does this perhaps stimulate consolidation as a way to deal with this, where you see just maybe the smaller guys give in to the bigger guys, and just from a consolidated perspective, they achieve some economies of scale and are able to better weather these kinds of conditions?
I think that's where it drives it to now. Is that a good thing? I don't know that that's a good thing, because but I do think that in the future farms are going to have to get bigger to sustain the amount of investments that it takes to stay competitive. There's some big equipment needs now, and some of that equipment is just too pricey for some of the smaller farmers. You're going to have to be big to be able to stay in this game. And again, I think that hurts the family farm. I think it hurts rural America as you contract with the amount of farmers that are there producing into the economy of smaller communities all around the U.S. And I think it'll drive more people out of the farming industry.
What about, you hear a lot of talk, Mike, about foreign countries and investors from foreign nations coming into the United States, buying up farmland. How real is that, and is that a concern?
We haven't seen it here in Mississippi as much as other places, but it's on the mind of our members of what do you do about something like that. I don't think we ever need to lose control of being able to produce our nation's food supply with American farmers, with American-owned farmland. So that's something that we really need to watch. There are some rules in place that there has to be a lot of disclosures done on that, but I think there's ways that they can get around those reporting mechanisms in the way they set those corporations up. So we need to be very careful. I think production of our nation's food supply is our number one defense mechanism. A nation that can't feed itself can't defend itself, and we don't need to be beholden to some of these foreign governments for the ownership of our land here in the U.S. where we're producing our food.
Yeah, totally agree. It actually evolves into a security issue
Absolutely.
It's more than just the ability to feed the population and eat to sustain, but it becomes a security problem, and we don't want a situation where we are beholden to that. All right, so what about Russia? The war with Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine, that area, that region, big producers of grain, as I understand it. How's that affecting the market?
We don't typically have a lot of that imported here in the U.S., but they do around the world. So it may be a little bit of boost to our farmers that disruption's going on over there, that we can capture a little bit of the market here in the U.S. What probably it's hurt more than anything is on fertilizer inputs. They've got a lot of that in Russia and in the Ukraine, and that has driven that market up. The inflation in just the fertilizer market alone has been almost 300% since 2021, and you're talking about maybe this year you cut back just a little bit, but if you do that for many seasons, then you're really going to see a crop yield loss on that, and it's something we can't afford to see.
What about the supply chain issues? We obviously farms and farmers utilize a lot of equipment, and that equipment through use, it breaks, it needs parts, needs repair. How's that going?
It's not good. So right now, if you, I tell my farm hands, the people that work for me, don't do anything that's a self-inflicted gunshot wound, because if you tear the tractor up, we may not get parts for 3 months, and that tractor may be down, and we may miss a whole harvest season on hay. Because of some equipment malfunction. There's some parts out there, but they're critically short in some areas, so we're just dealing with that. But the supply chain issue is a huge problem.
So you guys are just getting whammied from all directions, and this is disturbing because we rely so much, and we take it for granted. I think when all of a sudden there is some sort of disruption, as we're experiencing right now with respect to inflation, supply chain, the cost of money, all these headwinds, we start to pay attention to this.
Well, I think if you look around the world and you start looking at Holland and their grocery stores over there being empty because of the policies that they put in place to combat global warming. If you look at Sri Lanka, to where they decided their whole economy there would go organic, and they can't feed their people now, and they had an overthrow of the government there. We just can't let those policies strangle us here in the U.S. We're capable of being better at what we do and having a cleaner environment, but we can't let the Environmental Protection Agency and these new policies in the new green world choke us off so we can't feed our own people.
Yeah, it's crazy, and thank you for that, because I did not list that amongst the headwinds, but certainly the regulatory environment and the push for that is a major issue.
It's huge. Just about all of our crop protection products are under attack and being scrutinized at the federal level, and some of them we just can't combat. And if you take some of it off the market, then you have to go back to mechanically tilling the ground, and they say, well, every time you do that, the carbon goes into the atmosphere, so it's a double hit. How do you want us to do it? The farmers here, I've had people ask me to write articles that we're going to be have a food insecurity issue, and I don't believe that's the case as of right now. That we've got lots of farmers out there and lots of farmland. We can produce the food that we need here in the U.S. and to help feed the world, but you can't do it at a loss. So on my farm, I'm a cattle producer, and I can tell you, you can't pencil a profit out on raising a beef cattle herd right now in the state of Mississippi. So I've got to do it this year at a loss, even though the consumers are paying a lot more at the grocery stores. We're not seeing it at the farm gate level. That's getting eat up with people that can charge more for the inflationary cost of doing business. But the farmers are price takers. So a lot of what we're doing this year is going to be done at a loss. We just can't do that too many years in a row and still want to play the game that we're playing.
Yeah. Is there anything positive about the outlook, Mike? I mean, I know it's what we had you in here to tell us about all these headwinds, and they're serious concerns, and I know you guys are working through that. What's happening that's positive?
Well, there's a lot of scientific advancements. The crops that we're growing now are able to yield more than what they have been in the past. So I think in Mississippi we want to have a great crop this year. I was just talking to you about what we saw in June.
Weather.
June was really way too hot and way too dry, and it's going to affect a lot of yield on some corn. But we still got a chance on soybeans. We still got a good chance on cotton. I think I think this cattle market's going to have to go higher because the people can't produce. So down the road, the farmers are going to be able to be okay with that. So
Incredible.
I think we're always going to be Mississippi's #1 industry. We just got to be able to weather this storm. And this storm it was just handed to us, and we're just going to have to get through it.
And they're incredibly resilient as well. And
That's right.
So I have a lot of confidence in that. But we'll continue to pray and watch out for this. Mike, thanks for coming in. Appreciate the update.
Anytime. Thanks.
Mike
Sure.
McCormick, the president of the Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation, has been our guest on Middays. We'll step aside for a break and come right back with more talk.